You wake up one day and realize that humanity has an invisible disease. And no, it's not the bubonic plague. It's much more elegant, more subtle. People begin to mistake their own inner demons for yours. Jung, with the air of a notary from hell, noted that nearly 3/4 of his dangerous patients displayed the same signal, the same little red flag waving before the catastrophe. And the insult? It didn't come with screams, fists, or knives, but with gentle smiles and affable manners. You recognize them because they look you in the eye and say with icy calm, "You are the evil." The beauty, or rather the ugly, is that no overt aggression is necessary. Their weapon is the absolute conviction with which they attribute to you guilt, emotions, and intentions that aren't yours. Jung called it shadow projection, but we could more honestly define it as dumping psychic garbage in the neighbor's garden. It works like this. What they can't stand about themselves suddenly becomes yours. And they declare it with such certainty that, if you're not smart enough, you end up wondering if you're really hiding a corpse in the closet. If you've grasped the absurdity of this mechanism, leave a like immediately. I'll know you're not the garden where others dump their psychic garbage. In 1913, while arguing with Freud like two traveling salesmen competing for the same position, Jung received a patient who seemed the patron saint of good manners. He spoke well, appeared concerned for others, even thoughtful. But there was one detail that made the psychiatrist's blood run cold. All the people the patient described as manipulative and evil actually had identical traits, identical to those he himself stubbornly denied possessing. Jung immediately understood that he was not observing an innocent error of judgment, but the staging of a psychic mechanism that could transform anyone's life into a medieval courtroom. That patient, with the grace of an angel and the precision of an executioner, managed to raise everything he touched. In 6 months, he had demolished 3 relationships like sandcastles, sent 2 colleagues packing for nothing more than breathing, and transformed his brother into a nervous wreck ready for the sanitarium. And the most grotesque part? He declared himself a victim, always and only a victim, an impeccable martyr who handed out crosses to others and kept the halo for himself. Jung understood that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. No, it was the most dangerous theater of the human psyche, the projection of the shadow combined with absolute conviction. Not a suspicion, not a maybe, but a rock-solid certainty carved into the bones. When someone unleashes what they can't stand and does so with the confidence of a prophet, you're screwed. You're not arguing with a person, you're fighting against a tailor-made alternate reality. And here things get even chillier. Neuroscience has confirmed what Jung intuited in his ink-blackened notes. During an intense projection, the projector's brain rewrites reality. They're not lying. Their own nervous system filters and distorts the world until every detail aligns with their accusation. It's as if they were looking at you through distorting glasses and then demanding that you recognize the monster they see reflected back at you. When someone projects with that absolute conviction, they don't just misrepresent you. They create a magnetic field, a bubble of distorted reality that draws in anyone who passes by. Jung called it collective possession. And he wasn't talking about black masses or Sunday spirits. It was psychology turning into an epidemic. One person sees the devil in you, and soon entire families, offices, or groups begin to see you with the same delusional eyes. It's the most sophisticated form of gaslighting, and it doesn't even need to be conscious. The projector isn't manipulating. It truly believes its visions. This is precisely why it's so convincing. Its absolute certainty outweighs your explanations, your "look, it's not like that." Every word of defense becomes further evidence against you. You're not justifying yourself, you're digging your own grave. Remember the ancient metaphors? The Gospel spoke of the speck in another's eye and the beam in one's own. Buddhism spoke of the tarnished glass that reflects only impurities. But Jung went further, showing that these distorting mirrors don't remain personal. They become collective architectures. Entire communities end up isolating, discrediting, and symbolically burning the scapegoat. You wake up one day and realize the village has put a spreader sign on your door without you ever having sneezed. Jung, with the precision of an undertaker listing causes of death, identified 5 signs that, taken together, sound like the death knell of sanity. First, absolute certainty. They don't say, maybe you're jealous. They say, you're jealous, period, with no room for appeal. They stuff you with a dress you've never worn, sewn with steel wire. Second, immunity to contrary evidence. You can bring documents, witnesses, even the Madonna into court. For them, every denial is further confirmation. If you deny, you're guilty. If you admit, you're doubly guilty. Third, emotional intensity. They exaggerate over trivialities, reacting violently to the slightest drop. A fleeting word becomes a momentous betrayal. A neutral gesture becomes an attack on their dignity. But you're not watching your own actions. You're witnessing their seething internal theater. Fourth, the victim narrative. The characters in the play change, but they remain the persecuted innocents. The world hates them. Their colleagues plot against them. Even their cat betrays them with a look. Fifth, recruitment. They're not content to simply see you as a monster. They have to convince others too. In a smooth tone, they feign concern. You know, I noticed that doesn't he seem strange to you? And so they plant poisonous seeds in others' minds until they transform an entire group into a chorus of inquisitors. If you see these 5 black horses galloping together, you're not experiencing a trivial conflict. You're about to witness the founding of a small medieval tribunal with you at the center of the stake.
Jung described this process as a 6-stage march, a psychological via crucis that begins with small suspicions and ends with your expulsion from the village. Stage 1. The initial projection. Small misunderstandings, subtle insinuations. You smile bitterly and think, he must be confused. Too bad, he wasn't confused at all. Stage 2. Crystallization. Misunderstanding becomes certainty. Doubt turns into dogma. Every attempt to clarify makes the situation worse. You're not defending yourself, you're just polishing the chains. Stage 3. Reality distortion. Every innocuous gesture is rewritten by their filter. If you speak, it's arrogance. If you're silent, it's contempt. If you breathe, it's a conspiracy. Stage 4. Social recruitment. They begin to sow their suspicions with an air of feigned concern. I'm a little worried about him, don't you think? And voila, the crowd begins to look askance at you. Stage 5. Collective possession. It's no longer you against one person, it's you against an entire group that has adopted their distorting lens as its official goggles. Stage 6. Systematic exclusion. The group closes in, and you become the heretic, the contagious one, the one who can no longer sit at the table. No one remembers where the story began. Now, the only thing that matters is that you are the designated enemy. It's a script that repeats itself everywhere. Families, offices, parishes, always the same, always lethal. Jung's lesson? Recognize stage 2 and escape before the machine eats you alive. But projection wasn't the only monstrous creature catalogued by Jung in his bestiary of the psyche. There was ego inflation, for example, when the individual not only vents his demons, but identifies with divinities, archetypes, and cosmic roles. He is no longer Mario Rossi, but the savior, the supreme judge, the village prophet. Be careful. We're not talking about the easy-to-recognize barroom narcissists. We're talking about the refined gurus, those who recite in a gravelly voice, convincing because they seem enlightened. Jung warned, the higher they climb on this imaginary pedestal, the more dangerous they become. And when they fall, they never do so alone. They drag others down with them. Then there was the identification with the social persona, the perfect mask that becomes a prison. They are impeccable individuals, extremely polite, always in line with expectations. No mistakes, no flaws. They greet you with the right smile, respond with the right phrase. Even their yawns seem practiced. But beneath this glossy facade lies chaos, all the repressed psychic energy that sooner or later will explode like a volcano. Jung called them time bombs in evening dress. Sooner or later, perfection shatters, and the contents of the shadow erupt in destructive forms. And finally, archetypal possession, the most theatrical of scenarios, when a person ceases to be themselves and becomes the puppet of a universal archetype. Their eyes change, their voices are transfigured, they speak as if invested with cosmic powers. Sometimes they play the part of the eternal victim, always seeking salvation. Other times, that of the warrior of light, at war against evils only they see. Or the divine parent who treats adults like children in need of guidance. Dangerous because they are persuasive. Their fervor is contagious, but behind the sacred guise lurks the risk of fanaticism. Jung noted with bitter irony, the saint and the fanatic share the same costume, but they wear it with different measures. Have you ever had someone who made you doubt yourself? Leave a comment, like, and subscribe. The worst is yet to come.
Among the most insidious signs Jung observed was the so-called repetition compulsion, which at first glance may seem less spectacular than archetypal possession, but is actually a cyclical curse that envelops anyone who approaches it. It works like this. A person experiences the same drama over and over again with different actors, but the same script. Today, he is betrayed by his friend, tomorrow by his lover, the day after by his colleague. Always the same story, always the same ending, with him in the role of the victim caught by cruel fate. In reality, Jung explained, it's not destiny, it's unconscious direction. These people emit invisible signals that attract precisely those who can reenact the original trauma. It's as if we inadvertently hand out the scripts. You will be the executioner, you the abandoner, you the traitor. And whoever receives the role ends up playing it without even realizing it. The result? We find ourselves trapped in a play we never chose to perform, with final applause reserved only for the perpetuation of the tragedy. Jung called it negative synchronicity, the unconscious's ability to orchestrate encounters and relationships that only serve to perpetuate the wound, not heal it. And the real threat isn't the repetition itself, but the fact that those who suffer from it recruit others as unwitting extras. In other words, all it takes is one bad hug, one misplaced word, and you find yourself trapped in a story that doesn't belong to you, condemned to play the villain in the fairy tale. Jung, after years of listening to complaints, accusations, and tavern-like dramas of the psyche, understood that the only true weapon was awareness combined with a rapid escape strategy. He called it a protection protocol, but it might as well have been engraved on a clay tablet with the title, How to Avoid Being Roasted by Other Humans. First step, trust your gut, not their sermon. If someone's description of you clashes with how you feel inside, listen to your gut. It knows the truth better than 100 poisonous harangues. Second, don't waste your time convincing them. Those who are immersed in their own projections are as deaf as a cracked bell. Every word you use to defend yourself bounces back like an accusation. Third, limit information.
don't give them material that could be turned into evidence of your supposed psychic crime. Fourth, document. Jung recommended taking notes. Today, we'd say screenshots and recordings. Projectors are masters at rewriting history in their favor. Fifth, have outside eyes. Talk to those who truly know you, those outside the circus, because only an outside perspective reminds you who you are when gaslighting envelops you. And sixth, the golden rule. Know how to retreat. Not everything is won through confrontation. Sometimes the only way to stay intact is to leave the table before the banquet degenerates into a witch hunt. In other words, not every fire deserves your wood. Do you remember that impeccable patient? The one with the cherubic air and the talent of a human catapult? Jung finally understood that his projections weren't shots in the dark, but a well-oiled system to avoid facing the real enemy, himself. He couldn't tolerate being manipulative, selfish, cruel, and so his unconscious had devised a trick like a street urchin, unloading all these qualities onto others. This way, he could play the part of the pure one, while around him, lives, relationships, and entire families were crumbling. And here lies the most grotesque tragedy. In fleeing from his own shadows, that man became the very thing he condemned. He accused others of being puppeteers while pulling invisible strings. He cried out about selfishness while sucking emotional energy like a vampire. Jung wrote it with the coldness of a surgeon. Man ends up embodying what he refuses to see in himself. In other words, he transformed into his favorite monster, but without ever recognizing his face in the mirror. The good news? You're not destined to the same script. Jung discovered that consciousness breaks the spell. The moment you recognize the mechanisms in yourself and in others, you cease to be a puppet. You're no longer a victim of projections, inflations, perfect masks, or compulsive repetitions. You are not immune to evil, but you become impervious to theatrics. It's the difference between drowning in stale wine at a tavern and calmly getting up, paying the bill, while others argue over empty barrels. Jung spent his life mapping these haunted territories of the psyche, not to terrorize you, but to give you a torch to walk by. Freedom, he said, comes from being aware of one's own shadows, of the antics of others, of the collective traps that turn the innocent into scapegoats. The danger lies not in the shadow itself, but in unawareness. Those who refuse to look within themselves end up using you as a dumping ground for their demons. And if you don't know how to defend yourself, you become the perfect target. His warning remains engraved like an uncomfortable epitaph. The most terrible thing is to accept yourself completely. Those who don't accept themselves will end up persecuting you, convincing the village that you're the monster. Your shield is not the fight, not the duel, it's your conscience. Distinguishing what belongs to you from what is stuck on you, knowing that certain accusations stink not because you're rotten, but because they come from barrels already gone bad. And here we end. If you've recognized these dynamics in your life, it's no coincidence you're still here listening. Leave a like to let me know you walked with me through this labyrinth and emerged with your torch lit. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future journeys into the most grotesque and revealing parts of the human soul. Tell me about your experience in the comments. That's where theory meets raw flesh. Thank you for sticking it out till the end. And may you remain lucid, ironic, and terribly aware. Always.